I never wanted to stop driving in the first place. I was only a few hours away from home after a long road trip to visit my parents on the other side of the state. They asked me to stay one more night and to just leave first thing in the morning, but I declined. I wanted to make it home early so I could have an extra day to relax before going back to work. The drive itself was as boring and as uneventful as you might expect. I was making pretty good time for the first leg of the trip, but once the sun had set, the storm clouds quickly rolled in. In a matter of minutes, it went from a cool, crisp autumn evening to a complete torrential catastrophe. Rain pelting my car sounded like machine gun fire through my roof, my windshield wipers working overtime to combat the downpour, though even at their highest setting, I could still only barely see a foot in front of me. After an hour or so of driving through this hellish weather, the traffic in front of me slowed to a crawl. Apparently, there had been a large pileup further down the road, and the traffic report on the radio said it would slow all travel on that route by at least an hour. I groaned when I heard this. After a half hour of continuous starting and stopping, I felt the karma of my decision to drive through the night begin to catch up with me. I found myself yawning almost each and every time I had to press on my brakes. Driving in this weather was bad enough for an alert person, but for someone who was drowsy was a recipe for disaster. My wipers streaked once again across my windshield, creating a horrendous shriek as they did so. This made my heavy eyelids shoot open. During this brief moment of clarity, I saw a lone road sign. It read, Ashby Hotel. Warm beds, cheap rooms, an unforgettable experience. Next exit. At that point, I had been sitting in the same spot on the road for nearly 20 minutes and decided that one night in a hotel was better than dealing with this. I pulled onto the shoulder of the road and drove for a minute or two, cars blaring their horns in disgust at me all the while, before pulling off onto the exit ramp. I was surprised to find that no other cars were doing the same thing as me. I've been in traffic jams before, and usually everyone and their mother tries a different avenue to save some time. The thought quickly faded to the back of my mind as I began to wonder where the hell this hotel was at. I had been driving for 15 minutes. The road turned from a smoothly paved surface to one riddled with rocks and potholes. My car shook violently as I progressed, and I was just about to turn around and rejoin the pack of stationary motorists when I saw it. At first glance, it looked like a simple, oversized house, like one of those old plantation-style homes. To be honest, I wasn't even sure if I was at the correct place until I saw the sign near the entrance. Welcome to Ashby Hotel. After coming this far, there was no way I had the desire or the will to turn around and continue my trip. I pulled into a nearby lot, which only had a couple of cars in it. Not many, but enough to reassure me of my decision. I exited my car, dashing through the rain and mud until I reached the front door. I opened it and stepped inside. When I did, a gust of icy air blasted out at me, almost knocking me back out into the rain. I steadied myself and thought they must have an outrageous electric bill to keep the place so cold. I had to strain to shut the door behind me. When I entered, I was taken aback by what I saw. Though the exterior of the building appeared somewhat run down, on the inside was quite the opposite. The lobby looked like it was used to cater exclusively to royalty. My eyes drifted over to a nearby reception desk, with a man slouched behind it, reading a newspaper. I walked over and asked if he had any rooms available for the night. Without glancing up from his columns, he said in a gruff tone, "It's $30 to stay the night, and we only take cash." "That'll be fine," I told him, though I thought it was odd since this was the first hotel I had ever been to that didn't demand a major credit card. I quickly rifled through my wallet and placed the cash on the counter. In return, he slid me a small brass key with the room number 25 on it. "Checkout is at 10 a.m., he said. "Enjoy your stay." I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but the way he said it sounded somewhat ominous. Regardless, I thanked him and made my way up the nearby staircase to the second floor. At the top, I found myself wandering down a multitude of corridors. The hallways in this place made this building feel massive. I found the correct hallway and quickly made my way to my door. Just as I was unlocking my room, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. It was only for a brief second, but it looked as if someone was staring at me from the corner I had just rounded. But when I looked again, I couldn't see anything. I hurried myself into my room and locked my door behind me. Breathing a much-deserved sigh of relief, I turned the light on in my room and was disappointed by what I saw. The room itself was as basic a room as you could get. It had a bed, a small old telephone on a rickety nightstand, a table which wasn't much bigger than the nightstand, and a small chair. I was expecting the same luxuries as I saw in the lobby, but this looked like a prison room. Hell, it didn't even have a bathroom. I was far too tired to complain though, and it did have a bed after all, so I was satisfied. I draped my wet jacket over the only chair in the room to dry, and fell face first onto the bed. My body was quickly becoming one with the mattress, and I was on the verge of blissfully fading into sleep-filled oblivion when I heard a knock on my door. My first impulse was to ignore it, and hoped it went away. But the knocking sounded once again. Struggling to my feet, I stumbled over to the door and looked through the eye hole. I couldn't see anyone. I backed away for a moment, rubbing my eyes before looking once again. Still, no one was there. Thinking whoever it was must have gotten tired of waiting for me to answer had left, I staggered back to bed and laid my head down. This time, I fell asleep without issue. However, about an hour and a half into my slumber, I was awoken to another knock at my door. The knocking only happened once, and I wasn't entirely sure if I had actually heard it at all. I waited for a few moments. One eye open to my darkened room, the other eye buried in my pillow. 5 minutes went by, and I began to shut my eye when I heard a new sound. This sound immediately made me sit up in bed with my heart pounding in my chest. It was the sound of my door opening from around the short corner of the hotel room. What confused me was, even though I could hear my door opening, there was no light from the hallway outside pouring into my room. Everything remained dark as I sat there waiting for something to happen. A minute passed by. Then 2. Then, a face slowly peeked out from around the corner of my room that led to my front door. It was a face of a man, but it nearly touched the ceiling. His eyes seemed to shimmer in the darkness, and his face had this horrific, joyful grin plastered across it, as if it were a child waiting to play a prank on someone. I held my breath as I was unsure of what to do. I found myself asking out loud what they wanted. A minute ticked by, and I received no answer. I started to think that I was actually dreaming, and this was some extremely vivid nightmare I was having. I watched as a long arm scraped the ground of my room, up along the side of the wall, and rose all the way to the man's face. He placed a long, slender finger over his mouth, and mimed the shh action to me. Seeing this unnaturally long arm made my heart shudder in my chest. Dream or not, I had to get out of here. I decided that the best thing I could do was to charge this person, and force my way past him to get out of the door. I steadied my breath. Then, in a split second, I lunged out of my bed towards the door. I don't even recall running past him, just opening my door to the blinding light of the hallway, running down the corridor and to the reception desk. I found myself hunched over, panting, trying to catch my breath. The receptionist asked me if everything was all right. I told him that there was a tall man in my room. The receptionist just shook his head and said that I probably should just leave. Not like he had to tell me twice. I ran out of the hotel, got in my car, and drove until I was finally home. When I made it home, I took some time to research the Ashby Hotel. What I found disturbed me. Apparently, in the late 70s, a man checked into the hotel, massacred the entire staff and the few residents who had checked in that night, before ultimately taking his own life by stabbing himself in the neck repeatedly. But that's not the weirdest part. The owner of the Ashby Hotel had been the very first victim of this massacre. Looking at a photo of him, I almost couldn't process that he was the receptionist I had spoken to that night. That's not all. The next day, I received a package in the mail. It was my jacket that I had left behind at the hotel. On the wrapping, it said, "We hope you enjoyed your stay." I don't know where I ended up or what even really happened that night. But if you find yourself traveling after dark, and you see a sign for the Ashby Hotel, don't stop. Just please, keep driving.